you. So I have outside on that little table with the prayer wheel, there's some cards about the Aloka Earth Room if you want to have a look. And also a book which recently came out, co-written by a friend and myself. And some materials from the work that reconnects from Constance as well. We just left it there for the week. And I just want to start by saying I actually don't like the term eco-Dharma, because I think the whole Dharma is actually about the laws of nature. But I just go along with it because that's what has been picked up by a lot of people. I call it rather, to interweave or weaving together Dharma and earth awareness. And so, Constance and I, we have been calling this week human body, earth body, one body, to support all of us, to have a clearer appreciation of the fact that our human bodies and the body of the earth are of one process, and to really viscerally experience it. And for that, it needs a certain amount of practice and repetition for that to really sink in. In the beginning, it's just like an idea, but that's how it starts, and then through repetition, like learning an instrument or learning meditation, learning to drive a car, we become more and more kind of integrated with that intellectual understanding. And maybe I just want to go back to introduce myself, forgot that one. So my name is Ayya Santacitta, which means peaceful heart or serene heart. That name was given to me by Ajahn Sumedho, who is an American senior monk in the Thai forest tradition of Ajahn Chah. And interestingly enough, my parents gave me the name Sylvia, which means coming from the forest. So I have kind of really, followed that naming in a way, which is surprising to me to see how that all panned out. And I've started with the practice in the late 80s in Thailand with Ajahn Buddhadasa, who was a contemporary of Ajahn Chah. And then I trained in the UK and England in Amaravati Buddhist monastery for about 15 years before coming to the US in 2009. And I co-founded a monastery in San Francisco, and then later we moved it to Placerville, which is, not too far from here. And I did that together with Ayananda Bodhi, who has also been teaching here a few times. And then our monastery almost burned down in 2021 with the Kaldor fire. And then afterwards we, decided to sell the place. And then I started the Aloka Earth Room in San Rafael, because I really felt like a very strong calling, to center updating the traditional presentation of Buddhism, which is just very deeply steeped in the old paradigm of domination and of patriarchy. And I don't think it's anybody's fault, but it just needs to be looked at and see what we can do, to update. Just simply, out of compassion and accountability, for future generations, to just try to do what we can to try to, live differently. But first, we really need to understand ourselves in a different way, and that's what we try to support, Constance and I, over this week, to shift perception, because that's really at the basis of any kind of appropriate response. It must come from a updated understanding of who we are and where we are. Okay, and Constance?
welcome. Is that, are we on? No. Is there something I have to push? Uh-huh.
Maybe a bit longer. Yeah.
Got it?
Mhm.
All right, great. So I'm Constance, and I'm just so pleased to have my new best friend that we get to teach together. It's wonderful. Adam had invited Ayya to come, and she knew that I was here, and she's also a student of Joanna Macy's. And my primary work has been teaching the Work That We Connects for the last 30 years. And to have a little bit of a starting story, I started studying at the Zen Center in New York in 1968. So have been on a Dharma path for a very long time. And when I met Joanna Macy in 1990-something, she brought together for me my environmental science background. I had gone to college to be an environmental scientist and save the world. Got very disillusioned because science was there, but no one was using it. So how do we change people's hearts and minds? So I shifted my major to theater, which makes a lot of sense. Well, how do we embody our wisdom of the fact that we are part of this living earth? And so when I met Joanna and started with that work, it brought together the Buddha Dharma systems theory. Joanna was a systems theorist and a Buddhist scholar. She wrote her PhD on mutual causality and systems theory, bringing together science, the science of the interconnection of all of life, with what the Buddha was saying, which is the interconnection of all of life, and brought those two together. She also brought in ritual. We're ritual beings. We need to be able to embody this understanding. It's not just going to be in our heads. So embodying the understanding. So there's group practices, there's rituals. And to me, it was just, I was like, okay, this is my work for the rest of my life. So I've been doing it for 30 years. And so the Buddha, the Dharma part of the Work That We Connect has gotten a little bit buried. So we're wanting to come together to re-highlight how they interconnect. So I will be talking and leading meditations, and I'll be doing more interactive practices to help us really get the embodied feeling that we are one with the earth. And then how do we take that knowledge forward into the world and live in a more conscious way? So that's and I think everybody's been through this list, but I really encourage people to send it out. And there's so many wonderful things that are being offered. Ayya's talks, and then we'll be doing interactive stuff. We're doing walking meditation and meditation, a big sky mind meditation up at Amira's for the sunset meditation. And then on the day long, we'll be doing lots of interactive practices. And then Sunday is a Council of All Beings, which is so fun. We send people out into nature to say, what being wants to speak through you? We're all part of the earth. We all have the ability to listen and see who of these natural beings, it could be a tree, it could be a microbe, it could be a mountain lion, an elephant. And then we come back and we make a mask. Every culture around the world has had rituals like this to embody the more than human, so that we get to do it too. So then we put on the masks and we embody that being, and we have a council, because we, the humans, really need the wisdom of our ancestors. And pretty much every being on this planet is an ancestor for us. They've been here longer. They've learned how to work together, so they have a lot of wisdom to share. And it's always amazing what comes through. So look forward to getting together with you and playing with you, my dear.
Thank you. So, it's just, I'm just seeing over there on the mantelpiece that monk, the image of the monk, the black and white photo. This is the founder of the Thai forest tradition, Ajahn Mun. interestingly, it's also, in the cottage where I stay over there, there's a small image of him as well. So he was a teacher to Ajahn Chah and to several of the other forest masters. Ajahn, forgot his name right now. Anyway, he was the one who went first into the forest, basically bringing about a revival of the basics, of how the Buddha might have lived, when he was walking the earth 2,650 years ago in Iron Age India. And meanwhile, this tradition was like a revolutionary kind of attempt, to bring back depths to the practice, and then they became very, very successful and have huge monasteries. And Adam and I, we've just been at Abhayagiri for the 30th anniversary, and they don't live anymore like Ajahn Mun lived. But, that's how it all started, and that seems to be, the way things are. We have like aspirations and great ideas, and then it starts to kind of become institutionalized and somehow petrified, and then lots of things are happening, and we can see it now, with the cultural paradigm we are all living in. There was a lot of good ideas and high aspirations, and now we've ended up with a president, who says that he is Jesus Christ. So this is really intense, what can happen over time, and we need, new ways of looking at our situation, because there's a lot at stake now. And I've gotten a teaching from Dine, ceremonial leader and international teacher by the name Pat McCabe, and in her own language she has been given the name Woman Stand Shining. And she says that there is this, because I asked her, what's your pit instruction? And then she was saying, asking the questions, who are we, as individuals, as so-called individuals, and where are we, and how is it? Because when we have a deep conditioning, that we think we are separate from the biosphere which keeps us alive, but in reality, if we really look deeper, we can experience very clearly, very simply for ourselves that every day, we are eating the earth, we are drinking the earth, and we are breathing the earth. And if you hear me saying that, it makes a lot of sense, but to really live from that place is something altogether different. And these practices, they are all designed, for bringing that visceral knowing back online. And currently there's about 6.2% of the global population is indigenous, people who still live on their ancestral lands and have kept, alive some of the ceremonies and teachings, and they have still languages, which are much more suitable for transmitting that self-understanding. And so there are still people alive today who have a visceral access to that understanding that they are part of a living, intelligent earth. But all of us, this understanding, has been forgotten, because we received a lot of education, which is on top of all of that deep knowledge, which our own ancestors also knew in their bones. But somehow it hasn't been passed on to us, because in the service of science and religion, education has been cleaned out, from all of these understandings, because it was considered for a very long time superstition and primitive and simply, unuseful understanding. And now we are coming full circle and starting to understand, no, this is very important knowing. And now we have to work our way back into bringing that online again, because it's in our systems, but it's not activated. And this is, a way how we can look at these practices to wake up that self-understanding again. And then through, repetition, making it our own, letting it really sink in deeper and deeper, and then we have then the capacity, to embody responses, which come not from the intellect, but come through the elemental intelligence of our own bodies, which are communication lines into the body of the earth. And the earth, is a self-organizing, self-regenerative being. And if we are connected to that intelligence through having, adjusted perception and have stepped out of the old paradigm of separation, we can act as the immune system of the earth. We can become spokespersons, for the earth, but not through our brains and our intellect, but through the intelligence of the body itself. And that's, what Constance and I try to kind of train together with others, and give you like a taste of it. I try to do that, through Buddhist meditation. In particular, what is a really very helpful entry is the meditation on the elements, the 4, 5, 6 elements, which is a very basic meditation in the first establishment of mindfulness, Kaya Nusati, mindfulness of the body. And then there's also other ways, of using awareness, to sense the aliveness of the body and the aliveness around the body. And then Constance is going to bring different embodiment exercises. And there's a very beautiful quote by an English teacher. He's passed away. His name was Rob Beyer. He was a Gaia House teacher, and he said, and I think this is such a succinct little quote, "Practice is not practice unless it affects perception." And in our case, it's, the old perception of that we are separate from planet Earth, and that planet Earth is like a stage on which we are walking around and, taking this and throwing away that, and basically, as we have been instructed by the Bible, to use the earth as our storehouse, basically, and sewage system. And stepping out of that into a way where we understand ourselves as participants of the planet, simply because our bodies are made of the same elements. And then, and to see oneself and understand oneself as a participant is a very different way of relating. Like a cell in a small cell in a vast body, the cell will never be able to understand what that body is all about. The cell is just doing her little bit or his little bit, but the cell can receive instructions, from this vaster body, who is obviously, knowing what to do since almost 5 billion years, has been able to sustain life and to develop it and get through incredible bottlenecks, and everything was frozen and then everything was boiling, and it's still happening. And to trust that intelligence, and also that this is not just all about us. We're just one species amongst many, and we are the most immature species compared, with trees and ferns and many of the animals. We are just a very young species, like just outgrowing, toddler existence, which, when toddlers, they know exactly what they want, and if they don't get it, they throw a tantrum. So we're a little bit like that. And to see all of that, with humor, but still, we can really imply quite simple practices to update the system. And let's see if there's anything else I wanted to say. And also I forgot, there's also people on the Zoom. Hello, welcome. So, the Earth basically displaying an amazing creativity, since such a long time. And we can actually lean into that and welcome it, And many of the indigenous ceremonies are all about that, about welcoming this information, to actually enter into our formation from the ground up. And every time, we are eating or we are drinking something or breathing something, we are ingesting information. And of course, if you are looking at it, oh, this is just food, then it is just food. But if you're looking at it, this is food and this is also information, it just is different. You're opening up a possibility. And that's what is meant, with shifting perception. Who we are and where we are and how it is, as Pat McCabe says. It's a very profound, very subtle shift, but it opens up a much bigger world. And it can be like kind of, quite startling in the beginning. So it takes time, to familiarize oneself with it. And then the word, meditation or cultivation, bhavana in Pali or gom in Tibetan actually means to familiarize oneself with something, with a bigger picture. And even Buddhism, has been handed down inside of a worldview. Buddhism is not has not landed here in a vacuum. Buddhism has landed here inside of patriarchy and inside of the old paradigm, And there's nothing wrong about it, but it's time for it to open up into the next paradigm. Because the old paradigm is obviously, showing more and more cracks, and rather than frantically trying to glue it together again and pretend nothing is going wrong, we can also take an interest what is coming through those cracks. What is the next iteration? And the next iteration is about becoming participants of the planet and taking guidance from the modern human world, which is here so much longer than us, and doing a great job. It's us, who are like out of sync pretty intensely. Having lifestyles which require 6 planets. There's something not adding up, really. And it's not about, blaming anyone, because I'm living that same way, but just taking an interest. What could we, where could we kind of begin? Because as Albert Einstein said, you can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness which created it. Because it's just like, top down from the head. That doesn't really work. But it's only, through the visceral understanding that we are part of this, that we are participants, that responses will come through us, and everybody has different roles to play according to our talents, our gifts, our location in life. And what we need to do is to kind of prepare ourselves to be able to receive guidance through this elemental intelligence. And I think let's just begin with a meditation and have an experience of it. And starting by sensing the body on the cushion on the chair, the weight of the body. Just checking in with yourself. How are you right now? Maybe you feel like confused by what you heard me say, and that's fine. That's how the mind responds. If you've never reflected on the things I mentioned, then your mind will most likely kind of flail around, like a fish outside of water. Just be aware of that. No need to change anything. Meditation isn't about having a different experience, but meditation is about knowing what's happening. So how are you right now, and what are you bringing here? Why have you come here tonight? And it's not only us sitting here, but we can also call to mind our ancestors who knew belonging to earth in their bones. And calling to mind the future ones whose lives will be shaped by what we do. And calling to mind all who are living with us now, human and more than human. And sensing, the gravity which is gently, holding us in place. Gravity of the earth, which shows us, where the work is. It's here. The limitations of having an earth body, it's part of the practice. We can't really escape that. It's part of what's needed, to be able to walk the path. Without a body, no practice. And the path, has, according to the Buddha, right livelihood, right action, right speech. It's all about embodiment. And if you carry, any stress or tiredness or excitement, just with the out-breath, let it drop down into the ground underneath where we are sitting. And maybe sending down some roots into the ground with the out breath. And with the in-breath, breathing up the vastness and the stillness of the body of the earth. The stability, of this living being which is evolving since almost 5 billion years, started as a dust cloud and has gone through so many iterations. And gave birth to so many different species, including our Homo sapiens. Human, coming from the same root as humus, earth, and humility. Human, humus, human body, earth body, one body. So coming back and into the body and sensing the weight and the aliveness in the body. The vitality, vibrancy. We can either, sense it as a energetic vibrancy, or some can also hear it as a high-pitched sound, that aliveness. And whenever the mind, wanders off into thinking about something, letting go of that and coming back into the body, sensing the weight as the body sits, and also sensing the aliveness, which is the result of, eating, drinking, breathing, the sunlight, which keeps us energized. And that aliveness is also around the body. The whole space, of this room is not empty. It is a fullness. Even we can't see it with our sense organs. So, breathing up the stability and the vastness of the body of the earth. And then, letting go and breathing out, relaxing into the space around us, which doesn't end at the walls of the hall. And sensing into that aliveness, vitality, And we are not sitting on the earth, but we are sitting in the earth. The earth body, ends a few miles up. So like sitting inside of a womb, which has given birth to this body through the help of our parents. But we never ever really cut the umbilical cord towards the body of the planet, because we are always held inside of it. And we can sense into that. So working a little bit with imagining ourselves inside of the body of the earth, and then sensing into that. In order to sense, we need to imagine, and in order to imagine correctly, we need to sense. And in that way, we can slowly bring it back online, that visceral appreciation of these bodies being part of the body of the earth. Because it's like a shifting of perception from, being separate on the earth, walking around like on a stage, to perceiving ourselves as inside earth, like a cell inside of a vast body. And that's, a perceptual shift which needs to be trained. But, there is indigenous people around the planet who have that like on their fingertips, because they've been brought up like that. They have had ceremonies like that. Their language has concepts for that. For us, it's much more complicated, because our language is very noun heavy and doesn't have words for it. So we have to get working on it. And that's, can be a bit confusing, and that's okay. We don't need to understand it immediately, but we need to stand under it, under that not knowing, and kind of cultivate the intention to know. And if the mind wanders off into thinking about something, just gently bringing it back and sensing the weight on the cushion on the chair, the aliveness of the body, the vibrancy, the vitality, maybe hearing the sound of silence, the high-pitched vibrancy. And in that way, kind of stepping out of the thinking mind into a capacity to sense with the whole body, the body being an organ of perception. Not just, like something with legs and arms which moves around the brain in the world, but a participant in a vast living being called Earth, planet Earth. So again the mind will wander off, and then gently bring it back and just sensing the body, its aliveness, vitality. There's elemental intelligences, the earth element, water element, fire element, wind element, space element. So this meditation, which we are doing right now, the primary reason for it, is to develop a different way of looking at who we are and where we are, and opening up a different perception. And then also refining the capacity for sensing. Because that's not something, in our culture which is, it's not something there's a lot of talking about it. So it's rather a distrust, that sensing could yield any reliable information. We need, huge machines, expensive machines to collect data. We can't trust our human capacity for sensing. That's more the message of the culture. And to step out of that. We don't need a microscope or a macroscope to know, that this planet is keeping us alive. And if we are kind of bringing that capacity back online, it will enable a different experience. Over time, the visceral knowing of our deep embeddedness in the biosphere will become available. But it's a multi-generational undertaking. It needs to start somewhere. To bring that back into the culture. That is, the most important thing is to step out from the intellect. And, as another teacher who I really have learned a lot from, Tiokasin goes to us, a Lakota ceremonial leader, and he says, allow the earth to save us. By listening, by returning back, and letting go this crazy idea, that we could save the earth or destroy the earth. We only destroy ourselves. So there's a lot we can learn from indigenous cultures by, reconnecting with our own indigeneity, not by copying other cultures and learning their protocols, but by remembering our own. So now just leave you do it now for about 5 minutes or so, sensing the aliveness of the body and the aliveness of the space around the body. We are inside a living being which is called planet Earth, which knows what to do since almost 5 billion years. And there's no reason to assume that's going to stop now. And I really like the concept, the other AI, ancestral intelligence, which needs to be brought back, to bring balance. In about 2 minutes I'm going to ring the bell and then we have a break for I think 10 minutes. And then time for discussion. So practice is not practice unless it affects perception. Unless it opens up a bigger way of looking. Seeing the conditionality of these bodies. And why the Buddha says, the body is empty, empty of a self, because it doesn't really exist independently of all this life forms, which make up the planet. And that can become a visceral knowing. And from, if one lives from that, there's very different responses will be coming through us. It's like learning a language, a new language, without words. So now we have a break, and then we're gonna ring the bell again at 7:03. So please go ahead if you'd like to get up. Now we have about 20 minutes, if anyone would like to clarify something or share something. And I think we have a microphone to go around. Should we do that? The microphone, send it around?
Yes, so the Zoomers can.
Yeah. And also at the Zoom, if anybody would have a question, please raise your Zoom hand or your physical hand, and then we can also include you, of course, in that.
And I'm happy to pass the microphone.
Thank you.
So that people can hear on Zoom what's being said.
Great. There is somebody on Zoom. I would like to start with you, Carol. Thank you.
Hi, so nice that you're here.
Thank you.
I wonder when you suggest that we sense the space around us, if you're talking about, say, like 6 inches away, sort of rather like you're in a womb of the earth, the womb, or further out, way out like the universe, space.
As you like, as whatever you feel called to do.
Great, thanks.
Probably start, start first a little bit closer by, but then you can just drop that and just allow awareness, to open up as vast as it wants to. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, this is Douglas. I'm Douglas.
Hello.
Thank you for your teachings tonight. I've heard at Mountain Stream, at various places, Thai forest tradition talked about, and I have never known what's the distinction that is the Thai forest tradition. I wondered if you could explain what that is.
Yeah. I think, the Thai forest tradition at the beginning of the last century, there were monks who were dissatisfied, with the way of practice in the city monasteries, where there was a lot of study, a lot of intellectual work done, and also a lot of ceremonies, and which had lost their depth, and had become more or less perfunctory. And then they had this idea, that they wanted to go back into the forest and live like the Buddha has lived in Iron Age India, 2,650 years ago, and carrying only 7 items with them, and living a very, very simple life and going on alms round every day, into the villages. Without knowing what they would receive or if they would receive something, and living basically in the jungle, which is was dangerous at that time, with tigers and elephants and all the rest. So they were living a life, very much in the middle, of nature, basically with very little certainty,
And yet the Thai forest tradition has continued to grow and evolve around the world.
Yeah.
And yet the people aren't going and living in the jungle.
Anymore, no. It's like the way the world is, samsara. There are people who have really good ideas, and new ideas, and then if they are successful, then they kind of degenerate again, isn't it? Until somebody then steps out again and has a new idea, And then that, if it's successful, it will degenerate again, and then somebody else steps out again. And that's the way it is.
Yeah, like how Buddhism is now being expressed in a new way in the United States.
Yeah, yeah, and it hasn't really fully landed in the United States yet. It has mostly, landed in the white middle class, like this place, for example. And there's also attempts made, to include more diversity, but it's still in the works, and also it hasn't really landed with the original caregivers of the land here, with tribal nations. So if for the teaching to really land on Turtle Island, it would actually have to meet, tribal cultures. And wherever Buddhism goes, on the planet, it always amalgamates with the culture of the land, like that's why we have so many different expressions of Buddhism, like Zen and Vajrayana and Chan and all of those different expressions. In the beginning, at the first Europeans traveling in Asia, they were thinking this is all different religions. They couldn't even see the commonality because they look so differently, So Buddhism is still arriving here, and as it now kind of opens to indigenous wisdom, it will certainly undergo, like another update kind of a thing, or a change. And actually, to just say that Ajahn Man, the monk here on the mantelpiece next to Ruth Dennison, I mean, he was an indigenous practitioner, we can say, because he wandered in his own ancestral lands and was brought up, on the land. And many of the great masters come from northeast Thailand, from the Isan area, which was the poorest area of Thailand, And all people, working on the land. And Ajahn Chah, had education, I think, 3 or 5 years, going to school and working on the field.
Was there indigenous culture in Thailand that
sure.
had its own religious roots,
Sure.
based in the land and the nature?
Sure, yeah. Yeah. Still are, like the so-called hill tribes in the north of Thailand still live like that, and the Thai Buddhism was very much, mixed with ancestor worship, with animism, with all of those things. But when it came here to the West 50 years ago or so, it had to be cleaned up of that stuff, in order to land here, because it was mostly the white middle class, people who would have studied on university, who would think at that time that this is all humbug. But meanwhile, things have changed.
Thank you.
So, just wanting to say, Buddhism isn't just like a monolithic teaching, which is arising in a vacuum and can then be objectively passed on. It's always passed on inside of a container, and the container changes with the times. And now
and
this
the
is
cultures
Yeah.
that's being introduced to.
Exactly, yeah. And then also inside of the culture with the time, because like 30, 40, 50 years ago, people, they just wanted to really very quickly get enlightened, and then practicing for 30 years, not having really, realized enlightenment yet. So then suddenly people notice maybe there's a few things we are missing, Maybe you can't just sit in a room, without any kind of devotional elements and so on. In the beginning there was the idea, we could just use meditation alone, and extract that outside of the devotional elements, and all of this embeddedness in a culture which, has different other methods, to soften and open the mind, not just on the cushion. That's not enough, And now slowly, we're finding out, that we need other support as well. And that's just, that's just a natural, evolution, In the beginning, one is very, kind of idealistic and simplistic, because one doesn't really know what one is doing. And then you do it long enough, and then you learn, by trial and error. And that's what we're all involved in, Yeah. And my first teacher, actually, Ajahn Buddhadasa, was also a participant in that, who tried to clear up all of the animistic and all of that stuff, so that Buddhism would be more, accepted in the West as a scientific method, and the prestige that brought then, But today, it's not necessarily like that anymore, Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your teaching. I just wanted to say I appreciate you quoting someone and saying that a practice is not a practice unless there's a change of perception. I really like that. And I have a question and a little bit of a comment. You said you don't like the expression that eco-dharma because all dharma is eco. Is that what you said?
In a way, yeah,
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
Dharma means nature, or laws of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, in my own practice and understanding of Buddhism, I there's kind of all these lists that the Buddha came with, and there's a lot about training of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also this earth aspect that shows up also in his teachings, but
Mm-hmm.
not as much.
Yeah, because people, at the time of the Buddha, they didn't need
Yeah,
to learn that so
makes
much
sense.
because they still lived that way,
Yeah,
They lived on the land and had that visceral knowing, I think, much more than we have, kind of lost it or forgotten it, rather not lost.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying, at that time they needed more training of the mind. The other earth aspect was already present in their lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
So initially I was much more when I started practicing. I was thinking more about the training of the mind, and then I had one teacher that was talking a lot about the body, and some teachers are talking about the earth. So I'm asking myself, how do I find a balance, or what's the, sometimes it's just, what am I going to practice today when I sit down, so
Mm-hmm.
still feels a little bit like two things and not one thing in Buddhism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, first, I think it's important to develop like a basic understanding of meditation, what's called the 4 establishments of mindfulness, the 4 satipatthana, and to come to a minimum understanding, that awareness and that which is known is 2 things, So that there's thoughts, there's feelings, there is mind states, and we can know them, and those changing mind states, feelings, thoughts, and sensations, they are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and empty of a self, to really have that understanding and being able to take refuge in awareness or in Buddha, So, for example, like a sort of anger might come up, and then also the accompanying sensations and feelings and all of that, and then rather than identifying with it, to be able to know it has arisen, and then just be with it, it will cease again, to have first that understand, that confidence, I think we need that first, and then we can investigate further, in the way how I was suggesting, because the practice, is happening inside of a cultural paradigm, and in the beginning we just first need to understand how the mind works, and then after there's at least a theoretical understanding, that we know the difference, between that which knows and what is known, the clouds and the sky. Do not have it all mixed up into one thing. Do you understand that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And once that is known, that's the basic, main point, of the meditation, to know the difference between awareness and that which is known. And once that, there's a kind of stability in that knowing, I think then it's also time to question the worldview, within which we are operating. And then as we do that, then there are a lot of emotions and thoughts and feelings get stirred up, But then we already have a way to handle those, To not get so kind of bound up in it and thrown around. Yeah, know what I mean?
Yeah, I do understand that.
Yeah.
And when you said, and then we explore after doing those basic practices and understanding.
The four satipatthana, the four establishments of mindfulness.
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And maybe the anapanasati, which is like the same approach,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said, then you explore further, meaning the earth and the...
No, it's more like exploring, the cultural paradigm within which you are living,
Mm-hmm.
All of us living, in a cultural paradigm which tells us, that we are separate from earth, and that we can, just go and take, and deal with it however we want. If we have enough privilege that we have the access to it,
Okay, I think I understand it a little bit better, how you're
Yeah.
bringing in the earth into the cultural paradigm, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because, the cultural paradigm of separation and everything else, like capitalism, all of those things which are all part of that paradigm of separation. Not with the naive idea that we can shift it all like in a quick manner, that's not possible, but it's more like individually, we can strengthen the visceral knowing, that we are part of earth, and it's like, I like really the principle of, pockets of sanity or islands of coherence in a sea of chaos, as things are becoming more and more unstable, because the old paradigm is starting to show more and more cracks. I think that's obvious, right? And we can't just go and fix it. This is impossible. But we can become participants, of islands of coherence, like here, people who are interested in this. And then there will be another island of coherence in the next town, and another one in the next town, And this is how networks of coherence can unfold, when the time is right.
Yeah, that's interesting. That reminds me a little bit how the Buddha's teachings were revolutionary for the time in India, where the castes were very strict, and so you're kind of bringing a little bit that aspect in what you just shared.
You could say that, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. I mean, not to compare myself with the Buddha, of course, but it's more like, it's like, just basically a shift in perception, Yeah, because the Buddha was saying, for example, a Brahmin isn't somebody who is born in the Brahmin caste, but a Brahmin is somebody who has insight into the Four Noble Truths, So it was just like shifting the whole thing around, Yeah, and that shifting, isn't like, an idea, but I feel like more it's something which is emergent. The word emergence is used a lot these days, because there is we can I understand, that the earth, if you understand the earth as a living being, even it is so vast, we cannot wrap our head around it, but it's a big living being, which has self-organizing intelligence. It has proven that since almost 5 billion years, because it was able to always, kind of consistently sustain life, and doing whatever was needed without anybody directing it, It's like it's a system, an intelligent system. And because we are part of it, there is that, simple shift in perception to allow the thought that we could actually participate in that intelligence. But that only works, if we stop thinking that this is the highest form of intelligence. Because this is just like the intellect is considered, to serve this other kind of intelligence. It's also very important, otherwise you'd never gonna been able to drive here and get your act together to show up. But if that's all we are operating from, that's a very poor, it's very little of what is really happening here. And this is why the worldview is so of paramount importance, because the way you think it is going to keep you imprisoned, And there's a lot of things going on and nobody knows because we're all thinking it's not happening, and then it isn't happening for us, It's just like doing this, And that brings a lot of instability for some time, Because when you step out of that corset, into that bigger space, then the whole body is like kind of confused, And to be willing to go through that confusion, for that one needs these islands of coherence, or call it Sangha if you want, That's just a different way of speaking the same thing, Because we need the support, Because it's uncomfortable to grow, It's a stretch. It feels like that,
It's interesting also. I want to let other people also ask questions, but I just wanted to say it's interesting how the earth is helping us to kind of really make this change.
Yeah, exactly,
so,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it's... this is why people say, indigenous people say, allow the earth to save you. Just forget about you saving the earth, this is ridiculous. Yeah. So we have one more person.
I love what you said in the very beginning about bringing the feminine more into the Buddhist traditions we're following. And
did I say that?
Well, I don't know the word
I'm
to
not
use.
saying that. But
you were talking.
I'm just trying to say it in a different way. Yeah.
Oh, so
yeah.
Please correct me, and also how we might bring a more feminine perspective into the shift that we're talking about right now. This breaking down of the cracks in the culture.
Yeah.
How can the female energy be more supportive than the intellect and the male?
Yeah, good question. If there are, enough people who want that to happen, and protect spaces, where that can happen, then it can happen, But Adam and I were just like at Abhayagiri monastery. Yes, was it yesterday, Adam? Yeah.
I was there 2 days ago.
2 days. Okay. At the 30th anniversary, and there's places where this kind of information does not enter at this point. Yeah. And and religions are particularly, kind of often very late, to catch up with those things. So, yeah. But it's it's definitely underway, yeah. And it's great, we can speak about it here it's a Buddhist center, and it's possible, yeah. And you're surely all aware, about also like the backlash, in politics and what's going on, in the administration, not only in this country but also other countries, because if this, the cracking up, becomes more and more obvious, there is of course fear, and the attempt, to blame somebody else for it and try to go back into the past and, a kind of idealized past, rather than, saying, okay, we're just gonna kind of jump, because it's scary, of course, especially if one takes it all so that we think we have to find the solutions in here, because that's how we are, trained so much. You can't just like put it down like because you like to, So it requires a lot of emotional resilience, to engage in that process, It brings up a lot of like fear, And people don't, including myself, I'm not particularly formed of those mindsets, But it's still a good idea, to find ways to engage, and then there's many different systems and practices, which have been developed, and the work that reconnects is one way, and if one has a good, meditation practice and really can get a perspective on the mind and not being so lost, in the emotions and mind states, then that's just a very important piece. Without that, it'd be very difficult to stay engaged. I think that brings us to the end, of today, and I could end with, I brought a little poem, a short poem, which is called "We Look with Uncertainty" by Anne Hillman. I think she's American. We look with uncertainty beyond the old choices for clear-cut answers to a softer, more permeable aliveness, which is every moment at the brink of death. For something new is being born in us, if we but let it. We stand at a new doorway, awaiting that which comes, daring to be human creatures, vulnerable to the beauty of existence, learning to love. We look with uncertainty beyond the old choices for clear-cut answers to a softer, more permeable aliveness, which is every moment at the brink of death. For something new is being born in us, if we but let it. We stand at a new doorway, awaiting that which comes, daring to be human creatures, vulnerable to the beauty of existence, learning to love. So thank you for coming, and tomorrow is another day.